All right, thank you again, Sheikh, and everyone for work. We've made it here to the course. I think we can, inshallah, get started. Those who are planning to join as they come online, we can admit them and they can hopefully participate in the program. The program, for anyone's benefit, for those who are new, is something that we're going to be recording. So you can always catch the recorded version for reference. And at the same time, if you're also just joining us for the first time, hopefully you received the email which explains the course outline for the instruction and session. What is the topics that we're covering? It's on the worldview of Tawhid, and Sheikh is going to be covering the session 2 today, inshallah, and try to make this interactive. So hopefully if you have any questions or if you have any comments as we go, feel free to post those on Zoom and we'll try and bring those up. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and pass this to Sheikh Mujtaba to lead us, inshallah, for this next session.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Once again, inshallah, everyone's doing well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your efforts as you try and seek knowledge and understanding, especially on the concept of Tawhid, the core concept in Islam, in fact, and in monotheistic religions, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And obviously, it is something that we need to reflect on and learn deeper and better as we grow older and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is, I just remembered something that was discussed many years ago in one of the weekend school madrasa meetings about teachers being told that we are teaching the same thing every year. Every year we're still studying about the same things, Tawheed and, Adl and so on, the principles. And I told the teachers to let them know that this will continue for those who want to further study in Hawza. They will continue until they graduate from the highest levels of Hawza. They will continue researching the same thing. Just like when we were studying, if a physician is studying about the human body, they're not going to start studying aliens. They'll continue studying the human body to understand them better, as they might analyze it, on various levels and get into it deeper. Nevertheless, it's still the same thing. So when it comes to monotheistic religions, the core principle or the core concept is actually Tawheed and belief in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, as we mature and grow in knowledge and nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to reflect on it and understand it better. I just wanted to clarify first. I do apologize. I am on a road trip, so if it's a little noisy here, I am in a rest area at the moment. So forgive me, inshallah, for any inconvenience or any noise that may be unwanted. The other thing is, I wanted to clarify that the lessons that were shared in the group and in the email, there are 5 lessons. They are the remaining lessons. So the readings are based on the remaining lessons. Some of you were with us last session. We had it in person, and some of you joined virtually. In the last session, we introduced the concept or the subject of Tawheed, and we spoke about the issue of worldview as well, and we compared the monotheistic worldview versus the dualism, or looking at the world as being in control by the 2 forces, the forces of good or the force of good and the force of evil, or uh, whether some may look at it as in some religious beliefs they have names like the Ahlul Iman, which is the again they look at the angels and their power, God and the angels as in charge on the one hand, and then on the other hand you have the Satan or the devil and his army, and almost like putting them both as equally in charge. I wanted to share this. Maybe we didn't get a chance to bring it up. Some of you may be familiar, and please, as we have our discussion, feel free to um, make comments or ask questions, share your opinions, suggestions. It is interactive. It is a class style rather than a lecture style. So please bear that in mind. One of the things that often in some religious groups they believe in is that we have the angel sitting on the one shoulder and then the devil sitting on the other shoulder, and they're both pulling or trying to whisper, and basically each trying to overpower the other and therefore become the leader of the individual. Nevertheless, in Islam, we do not believe in that concept. We have the angels that are recording things, obviously, Raqib, who is Raqib and Atid. Now, some suggest that Raqib and Atid are two. Others say Atid is the description of Raqib, Raqib being the observing, the supervising, or the one who is watching. And Atid, his description or his attribute being ready to write, being extremely sharp and ready to write. Nothing gets, basically nothing is, they miss nothing. Nothing gets neglected or missed. Nevertheless, we acknowledge the presence of shayateen. However, they're not in the same level of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of power and control of the universe, control of the individual, and the affairs of the individual. And yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them some ability, gave them long life, gave them the ability to whisper to us, but they're not in charge, and they will not be able to do anything if God does not allow it. Today's discussion, inshallah, on still we are in the lessons. You have the lesson 1 here is realistically lesson 2 in the email that was sent, and we have 5 of those. Inshallah, we'll cover them, so we'll have in total the 6 sessions. We're still on the world view of Tawhid, and what we will be, inshallah, discussing this in this session is the different world views, the materialist, in the obviously we have the Tawhidian monotheistic, and we have the philosophical worldviews. And it's important to basically initially we are going to have a discussion on the concept of worldview and see how do we understand the world around us. And we need to distinguish between the two concepts, how we feel about the world versus how we have the knowledge that we have, therefore the proper understanding of the world. And this varies from individual to individual based on their belief, obviously based on their whether or not they're believers in monotheistic believers or other type of believers. This may vary. So we have, for instance, the scientific, which is very materialistic, very very much about this world being explained through itself, nothing beyond this world. Very shallow, obviously, and we need to understand that though Islam recognizes, and though as Muslims we recognize the fact that um, science and scientists have contributions towards humanity and towards the well-being of human beings, but on their own they cannot explain everything in this world. And there's so much that could be said about how it would be basically the glass would not be full, or the equation would not be complete if we just were to explain the world from a very scientific, rigid scientific perspective. So that's one of the ways of understanding. The other one, when we say philosophical, we're not speaking of the schools in philosophy. Rather, it is a worldview that is not strictly scientific and yet not acknowledging religion. And so there is at least some level of understanding of the world beyond laboratory, beyond what you can experiment and trial and error. It would be an understanding of the world that is based on for instance, the presence of things that are not possible to explain, by a scientist. For example, as a scientist, they try to even explain things like emotions, for example, beliefs, emotions. They fail to understand how could one, through his beliefs and emotions, one who by nature is protective of their lives, is willing to sacrifice, for instance, their lives. Whereas a philosophical worldview can explain that, because they see, they speak of things beyond. You could almost see it as an agnostic. They see things beyond science and what you can experiment in a lab. They see the presence of, for instance, an intervention from a superpower, for example, something that's beyond this world, for example. But they don't see any truth in religions and religious beliefs, and therefore they try and explain everything based on their theories and their assumptions, and deny any, obviously, explanations that are given by religious community or those who look at the world through a religious lens. And the last one, obviously, we have the religious worldview, which is obviously the view of those who recognize God, recognize the messengers of God, not just God, the messengers of God, and the religions that are, the prophets of God, the religions that they brought, the teachings, and so on. And therefore, their worldview is completely different. It is from that lens, from that perspective, and they understand the world through that, through explanations given by, their religious group or text. Or
thank you, Sheikh. For one moment, if I may.
Yeah.
There was about 6 or 7 people on the waiting room. I did not realize, because I was wondering what happened. So maybe just give a 2-minute just brief for anyone just joined. I just admitted about half the participants.
Okay.
Because I didn't realize where they were.
Okay.
I think the Zoom thing, we had something there. So just feel free to shed a brief light for those who are just joining us.
Sure. No problem. Inshallah. So once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah for those who just joined us, and thank you for joining, and apologies for the delay in allowing you in. We were briefly discussing the worldview of Tawhid, and versus other worldviews. So first, what we did, we discussed the concept of worldview, and perhaps we could elaborate a little further here. The concept of worldview is, and this is important to distinguish it from feelings, emotions, assumptions. It is knowledge. It's based on knowledge, what we know, and how we therefore understand our understanding of the world. And so it's not necessarily an individual's work. It is more of a collective belief, a system of belief that is based on, collective understanding of the world. So we have those who explain the world from a very scientific perspective and try and explain everything from a scientific worldview, including things that often are not possible. And I gave the example of emotions, for example. Or beliefs, faith, the concept of sacrifice. A lot of these things are not possible by science to explain, and yet they try to somehow explain it there. They may, and this is something I often tell mu'mineen and mu'minat, that we have often people who try and they attribute feelings and emotions to hormones, for example, within the human body. So as things change, that's this hormone makes you happy. This hormones make you. It's almost like mixing the cause and the effect. Which one is causing which. Whereas another group of people who have, who look at the world from a different perspective, specifically the philosophical, as he puts it, Shaykh Mutahhari in his book. And I do want to make this point here that some of the concepts that he mentions there, when it's translated, it loses its meaning. It's a specific concept in the way it is presented by him. So as we read, if you find something that is not easily digestible, we can discuss it, because it is, again, it is based on his writing as an Islamic scholar in the Farsi language versus, one who is trying to translate that, and especially when we are trying to translate it without a specific religious reference or affiliation. In any case, when it comes to the group, the philosophical worldview, the difference between them and the scientific worldview is that they acknowledge, it is for basically looking at the world through the lens of those who acknowledge that there are certain things that science in the lab cannot explain. There are, for instance, there is a concept of, I'll give you an example, the concept of karma. How does the concept of karma exist for those people? They feel like it's energy in the world, in the universe, it comes back, all of these assumptions and theories that are given. But they do recognize that, there is an effect for our actions beyond the physical effect that we see and we can feel, beyond what is tangible. And so for them, they do acknowledge the existence of certain things that are beyond nature and beyond what we can see physically, nevertheless, and which is very positive for them to have that acknowledgement. Therefore, they can explain and see the world from a much broader lens than the scientific one. Nevertheless, they do not acknowledge the religions, prophets of God, their teachings, and what that lacks is that the world is complete. Basically, understanding the world is completely based on trial and errors. Earlier this morning, we were having a reflection on Dua al-Sabah. Some of you are familiar with Dua al-Sabah. In there, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he says, when you created this world, O Lord, you did not need to do any trial and error. من غير أن تمارس فيما ابتدأت به لغوبا ولا علاجا. You did not need to try things and then improve. Ilaj is where you, okay, you fix it. Okay, something, this did not work. Now we need to fix it. That's not how God created the world. And that's not how the religion or God's religion is. Any system, any worldview that does not acknowledge religions and God and or specifically the religious worldview, they will be continuously trying to improve through trial and error. It is a journey. It gets them closer, but it is much longer journey. One of the very famous speakers in Iran, he passed away probably around 40 or 50 years ago. About 40 years, I would say. He Falsafi is actually, interestingly, his name is to do with philosophy. It's Allama, as very learned. Many years ago, he commented on this very issue of seeing the world from a lens of even not just scientific, even those who acknowledge a superpower, agnostic, from a lens of an agnostic, who is even trying to be ethical, yet does not acknowledge religion and God's teachings. From their perspective, he gave examples of how when they want to introduce certain concepts, like for instance, the concept of equality. So everybody's equal. You have to give everybody the chance, regardless of their feelings, emotions, and so on. Then, and I wanted to mention how many years ago, because he predicted what happened today. Back then, around 40 years ago, he passed away. So his teachings or his the writings that he has on this are probably more than 50 years ago or something around there. He then said that society, without acknowledging the religion, though they might try and be ethical, they will make mistakes to the point that they would eventually allow, and this is his prediction, he said, they would make mistakes in trying to grant everyone equal rights and freedom to the point that they would allow same gender marriages, for example. Back then, there was none of that. But he could see it because of the worldview. It is a worldview based on basically neglecting, based on the collective human thinking, but with complete neglect of religious texts and books and teachings, and therefore they try to do something good, but with lack of understanding, they're constantly trying to improve it. He gave examples, or some of our scholars often give the example of the systems, the economical systems that humanity suggested. Again, without the presence of the religious worldview or Tawhidi worldview, monotheistic worldview. Examples were given of the economic systems. For example, the communist economic system versus the capitalist economic system, both of which are trying to offer something that they suggest is the best for humanity, for advancement, for this, the society to thrive and so on. Yet both of them failed, and we see how both have definitely failed their society, and they constantly have to change their theories and so on. All of this, why? Because of the lack of acknowledgement of the religious worldview or the Tawhidi worldview, based on the acknowledgement of God, acknowledgement of the messengers of God, and therefore acknowledgement of the systems that are introduced by the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's in a nutshell the three different ways of understanding the world, or the worldview views that he mentions there. Before we continue, are any comments, any questions? I don't know if anyone is trying to speak. I cannot hear anyone. Also, I wanted to mention something while you think of your questions or comments, and please do try and keep this interactive to the best of your ability, inshallah. I'd love to learn, and all of I'm sure everybody else would love to hear from.
Sorry, I don't know if Sheikh just dropped off Zoom. Maybe his phone died, but we'll see. Hopefully, he can join us back. Thank you all for those who are here, and again, sorry for the delay in getting some of you in. If anyone has had their email sent to them while we are waiting for him to join, maybe we can just look at some of the goals and topics of discussion, and feel free to comment on anything that you feel is pertinent or helpful for us to all benefit from. Use the chat feature, inshallah. All right, looks like Sheikh is back.
My apologies. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
No worries.
I got disconnected somehow.
I think you're sideways now, Sheikh.
Okay, let me see. How do I fix it? Okay.
It definitely provides a different worldview, the sideways.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, is this better now?
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I don't know. Can anyone tell me where you head up to, so I don't repeat myself too much?
I think you were mainly saying if people have any comments or questions, to feel free to share, and then I think after that you might have dropped off.
Oh, okay, it dropped that then. Okay. So there was something I wanted to remind everyone of what we discussed in the first session on the concept of worldview, and we had some activities, if you recall, and although we did not get much participation, I just hope that we can get there somehow. I know being online is not as easy as in person, but if we can try and get more participation. But one of the things that we discussed last session regarding worldview, or specifically Tawhidi worldview, is that it is not, we're not speaking of Tawheed as we discuss it in theology. I just wanted to make this clear and clarify this point. So when we speak of a Tawhidi worldview, it is not, or the worldview of Tawheed, it is not us speaking of Tawheed in Usul al-Din, in theology, or the principles of the, the main beliefs as Muslims or as followers of Ahlul Bayt, although it is somehow intertwined and connected, but that's not what we are trying to discuss. The difference here is that we are looking at the world with a Tawhidi lens, and therefore understanding the world, understanding anything that, again, we gave the example of economy, for example. A Tawhidi worldview it covers economy from a Tawhidi perspective, covers philosophy from Tawhidi perspective, covers science from Tawhidi perspective. Not just, okay, our beliefs, and so one of our beliefs is, believing in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one clarification I wanted to make. Another important clarification, when we speak in Usul al-Din and we say the five, it is simply to explain. It's not, we're not speaking of five powers or five things that are completely independent of each other. The principles of faith, being, Tawheed, Adil, Nubuwa, Imama, Ma'ad. We're not speaking of five independent things, because the main asl is, and the main, the root or the core of the religion is Tawheed, even in theology, in Usul al-Din. Nevertheless, we are trying to understand or focus on the different things that we need to understand and believe in as part of our theology, part of our belief system. Otherwise, Nubuwa is part of Tawheed. Adl is part of Tawheed. Imama is part of Tawheed. And obviously, Ma'ad is part of Tawheed. All of it goes back to Tawheed. So a Tawheedi worldview explains the world, explains theology, explains science, philosophy, economy, everything from the lens of someone who believes in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the fact that, as we say in the Tawheedi philosophy, that لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله. There is absolutely nothing that can affect or change things in the world, in the world of existence, except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just wanted to make those clarifications, and perhaps if there are any comments before we continue on, inshallah. So since you have, I'm not getting comments from you. I'm going to ask questions, but I do want answers or participation in getting some, suggestions on the answers. So regarding worldview, can anyone tell me what do they understand from the term worldview?
Someone, I think, commented in the chat, it's perspective or lens through which we understand the world around us.
Yes, yes. But we need to just be very clear that it's based on knowledge, not based on feeling. So we're not speaking of every individual person's worldview, because if we make it based on feelings or based on perspective only, not collective understanding of a group of people who share certain view or certain belief on the world, then we would have more than those three worldviews. We would have millions of worldviews, if you agree with me. Am I making this point clear?
I think so.
So what I'm trying to say is, if I was to look at, if I was to understand a worldview or suggest that a worldview is how I view the world personally, how I feel, and how I feel the world is and is operating and how it should be and so on, how many worldviews would we have?
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone will have their own
Yeah.
opinion, and it's not based in some study or some text or
exactly. So what we're trying to say here is that it's not, when we speak of a worldview, we're not speaking of an individual's perspective on the world, rather a system or a school of thought that sees the world in a certain way and therefore understands and explains it from that perspective, from that lens. So yes, it is a perspective, but not an individual. Is that clear? Would that make sense?
Yeah.
Very. Alhamdulillah. So another perhaps reflection that we can have a discussion over regarding the issue or the problem with the philosophical worldview. Or let's even take it a step further, the scientific worldview. And believe it or not, we have many Muslims today who are stuck in that worldview. So it's not about the it's not about the group of faith that they belong to. It's more of the thinking or the perhaps the school of thought in terms of their life and their understanding of the world that may not necessarily align with their the religious group that they belong to. I think we did go over this last time, of how some Muslims may be dualist in their in understanding the forces that control the universe, yet, or even polytheist, not just dualist, and thinking that certain things, often people use the statement, money makes the world go round. Have you, I'm pretty, I would assume that everybody would have heard that saying, yes? So now the question is, what is the issue with that saying?
It's devoid of God in the picture.
Yeah, pretty much. It's basically, is it God that makes the world go around or money? So many people, I remember one, some of you know that on the dollar sign, they have, on the dollar bill, they have the statement, "In God we trust." I'm assuming everybody's seen it, yeah? Now, on that, many, many years ago, I was speaking to one of my teachers, actually, and there was a discussion over, how people see the world and so on. And one of the things that was brought up, he said, um, did you know that on the dollar bill, this is what they say? I said, no. And he brought a dollar bill. And then he said, but you know what the problem with it is? And can anyone guess what was the suggestion? The suggestion was that their God, or many people's God, is this bill itself. Yes, in God we trust, but whose God? It's this bill, because it makes the world go around, according to so many. So again, many people could be monotheistic in their as in a theory, in terms of the religious group that they belong to. But when it comes to practice, and when it comes to how they perceive the world, they may be looking at it from a scientific lens. So can anyone share with us what is the issue with a worldview that is based on science only, scientific worldview? And I did mention that we have many of our community members and some speakers who are stuck there. Yes. Definitely, I see the comment, limitations. Definitely, it has limitations, but it would completely fail to explain human beings, because human beings are not just the physical body that they are. And again, even non-believers or non-religious people who have understood humans better, they acknowledge the fact. If I'm trying to read the comments, okay, it comes in a different way.
Say science has, yeah, maybe you can keep your thing. I can read it out.
Okay.
Science has clear and acknowledged limitations. It changes over time. It is incomplete. That is one of the comments. The other one is it avoids questions of why and instead focusing only on how.
How? Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, they do try and explain how, but the why is not there. I mentioned sometimes they mix the cause with the effect. They I remember when I was in Vancouver, they said that everybody needs vitamin D because and everybody therefore is depressed because they lack vitamin D. So my question was, is it that they lack vitamin D, therefore they're depressed, or is it that they're depressed and therefore the body shows that lacking? Or is there a correlation, or is there no correlation? It's in the sense that is it that they're simply depressed because of lack of sun, and therefore they attribute that to they attribute depression to again the lack of vitamin D, and so they think it's okay. Vitamin D will help with the depression. The issue here is, yes, we can figure certain things, how they're happening and so on, but there are certain levels that we cannot explain from a scientific perspective. And yes, definitely one of the main issues is that it is constantly going through, and this issue is applicable both for philosophical and scientific worldview. It is constantly subject to error. And it's basically, it has to keep they have to keep improving on it, and updating their understanding of the world, of understanding of um, every system in the world, political system, economic system, every system. They have to keep updating their understanding of it, because again, it is subject to error. And once they figure that their previous opinion was wrong, or was erroneous, then they have to improve and update and so on. The philosophical one, I already, I think, mentioned one aspect of, its shortcoming. Any other suggestion on why can't we look at the world from that lens, and why wouldn't that be sufficient? There's a major point I want to make here. There's a concept in economy, it's called opportunity loss. Assuming the name explains it, but it's not, sometimes you don't necessarily lose, in terms of financial loss, you don't really lose something that you had, but you could have had and you lost. Yeah. Here, in terms of a worldview that is neglecting the creator, and therefore the systems that are introduced by the creator, wouldn't that limit us, or basically block us from so much that we could have learned and understood, should we, or if we had acknowledged those teachings, acknowledged God, his oneness, understood the world from that angle?
I wonder if over a long period of time, as scientific and philosophical perspectives continue to develop, they ultimately support the Tawhidi view.
Yeah, they will get closer for sure. Definitely, they will get closer. And as human beings, and this is my humble opinion, the society is maturing. Human beings are maturing, and as human beings mature, they will get closer to the Tawhidi worldview, because that, Tawhid is within us. Perhaps, again, this is more theological, but I have mentioned to people, when it comes to people who deny, atheists, and some of you who are with us in the translation project, they know that the term that we used for kafir is a denier. And it's important to understand why God calls them deniers. Denying is basically something you already know, and kafir comes from basically burying something. So the farmer, for example, is referred to as kafir because he takes the soil out, puts the seed, and covers the seed, and that's kufr. And so hiding it, therefore, basically the ones who are referred to as deniers or kafir, they know that it's there, but they're covering it. Imam Ali alayhi salam, in his statement, he says that the messengers were sent to bring out what is buried in the mind. Dafa'inul uqul. It's a beautiful statement. Basically, it's already in your mind. The prophets come to bring that out. Or in another statement, he uses the expression of their role to remove the ashes from over the charcoal, so that the flame is visible then. So the flame is there. The flame of monotheism, the flame of Tawhid is there. Another comment.
It says scientific worldview only would hinder the appreciation for the non-scientific knowledge. For example, spirituality, personal actions, etc.
Yes, very correct. So if definitely, if we go from that angle, eventually we'll get somewhere. but it is a much longer journey, and definitely it puts obstacles. It hinders the possibility or the opportunity of advancing much faster and getting to the goal better or sooner. Now, one thing that perhaps if you did the readings that were assigned for this week, one of the concepts that was introduced there is the criteria for a worldview. Did anyone get to read that section? So I think we kind of covered to a degree what we mean by worldview and therefore what is the criteria. If anyone wants to share a few things, otherwise, I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I can share a few words after. Ideally afterwards, inshallah.
Ideally, a worldview is also not only permanent, but it's also purpose-oriented. One thing that the philosophical and the scientific worldview fail is to provide a purpose. The philosophical, for example, there are so many contradicting philosophies out there that it's even hard to choose one. And in the scientific, even though you are trying to prove a goal without the completeness and the oneness of God, it's really hard to find that purpose at the end of the day. Although I do believe that even in the worldview of Tawhid, science actually helps us prove the worldview of Tawhid. Because we see one system. Even in science, we can prove that. I think that they go more hand in hand than people think.
That is very, very correct. And in fact, any scientist who looks at the world from the scientific lens, but with an open heart, would have no choice but to see God and therefore see the oneness of God, in fact, in the universe. One of the things that I often mention to is the fact that we have in the world of physics, for example, we have rules that govern the entire universe, or what we know of the universe. Okay, that itself is Tawhid. One set of rules for all of this, whether we're here on Earth or in the sun. Certain the rules with regards to perhaps how velocity, gravity, many of these physical laws that are there, they govern the universe, or what we know of the universe. And therefore, it actually itself proves that there is a one creator, or one who is in control of the entire universe. But this definitely helps, and that is precisely why we read in the Holy Quran so many references to science and the way God explains the world from a scientific perspective. So
The main strengths of science, experimentation, verifiability, replicability, are also what sometimes make it reject religious beliefs, because they cannot be experimented upon, verified, and so on.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a main lacking in a scientific worldview, and the fact that we simply cannot explain everything in the world, and understand everything in the world based on experiments and you know examination in a lab and so on.
If I can just add one point, although I do
Sure.
agree with Sister Zohra, one thing I would like to point out is, for example, this is just my observation. The Imams of Ahl Bayt al-Islam, a lot of them spoke about concepts, for example, the universe, body parts. I believe there's a hadith from one of the Imams that even spoke about a bone in your ear that makes you be able to hear. They all spoke about that long before scientists like even knew about it. And now we are able to prove that all of those things were correct from a scientific worldview. If that doesn't confirm the oneness of God and the Ahl Bayt, I don't know what does. They do go hand in hand.
For sure, definitely. So regarding, to go back to the criteria of a worldview, when we speak of um, a worldview, I mentioned that a worldview should explain every system that exists in the world, whether it be the science of the world and how the world operates from a scientific perspective, and it also should explain other systems, a worldview of a complete worldview or a comprehensive worldview should explain economic systems, should explain political systems, philosophical systems, should explain even human beings, not just biologically and physically, but also emotionally and faith-wise, and explain concepts that often the scientists are unable to fully understand and therefore explain. And this is why we see that Tawhid worldview or Tawhidi worldview is the most comprehensive and the most befitting to explain the world.
Someone mentioned the idea of opportunity cost is useful because the scientific worldview simply thinks we don't know yet, that things can be explained through science, just maybe in the future. They don't see the inability to explain in the present necessarily as a valid way to disprove their worldview.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. That is the main problem with any system that does not acknowledge God and therefore does not acknowledge the religions and the teachings of the religious teachings of the religions that are by prophets of God, is that they set humanity back. I have I've mentioned this. I believe maybe in the last session we discussed this, but every advancement humanity has ever had, major advancement, major leap in their advancement, has been inspired by or directly taught by prophets of God. There is actually there's work done on this, even in terms of languages and the advancement in languages. A very simple, straightforward example is the Arabic language. The Arabic language, the structure of the language, the grammar of the language, and the depth of the language developed, although the language was there and was so capable, but it developed after the revelation of the Holy Quran through the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, specifically Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salawatu wa tahiyya. There is a study about this and how the Arabic language was and how it became. And therefore, today you see the strongest, most expressive and richest language in the world by far is the Arabic language. Other languages that are so powerful, including Farsi or Urdu or other languages that are related, are powerful through it. Yes, they may have evolved in terms of becoming more, having more, for instance, emotions when it comes to Farsi and Urdu in terms of poetry and so on. But they evolved and developed through the Arabic language ultimately, which again became the powerful language as we know it after the revelation of the Holy Quran and through the teachings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt salawatullah wa salamu alayhim ajma'in. And so this is just an example, but if we go back in history, you'll find that every advancement, every leap that humanity has gone through and achieved, every level that they've achieved has been inspired by or directly taught by the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so today, if we want to advance faster and like progress as humanity in every aspect, in every system that we have, the best way and the ideal way is to see the world from a lens of a muwahhid, a tawhidi or a monotheistic lens, and acknowledge the teachings of the prophets of God and specifically the Prophet of Islam, and through that progress. A question as perhaps an activity for everyone. I mentioned this earlier or alluded to it earlier, but a good perhaps activity. What do you think today most of the world operates on? What worldview they operate upon? What's the dominating worldview today?
I could be mistaken. I think there's a particular term for this. I believe it's called secular humanism. It's basically the belief that humanity is capable of deciding for itself what's morally wrong or right without the intervention of God. And that takes on many forms, but I could be mistaken.
Yes, and and how when humanity is deciding, that's it's a very good reflection. And if we look at the world from a secular lens and look at humans as being capable of developing the systems for themselves and deciding for themselves, where is it going to lead us to? Which worldview would it be to start with? I think some of the comments, I saw some of the comments. One of them mentioned that it's, the dominating worldview being the scientific worldview. And this very notion of secular humanism is what literally leads to the scientific worldview. Now, if we look at today's world in terms of atheist, agnostic versus religious communities, what would be the most dominating? What's the biggest population? Believers, monotheist, or others? just trying to. So we have material worldview. Somebody said scientific. Dominance, impact.
One said power, dollars, permanence, impact.
Yeah.
One said because it's materialist, what you can see. One said, great question, but I would like to say religious or philosophical. However, I believe it is scientific.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, to be honest, even within, I mean, if we ask the question, what's the greatest population of the world? I would say it would be monotheistic. You know, between Muslims and Christians, we have probably more than 4 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And then add other monotheistic, religions. You know, I think they will be the majority versus the agnostic or, you know, non-monotheistic, but, you know, believer, and then the agnostic or the even the atheist. But if you look at the worldview that is most dominating, by far it's the scientific, because it is also dominating. This is precisely why it's so important to have these conversations, these discussions, study, understand, even like consider, you know, what worldview do I have, and what worldview do I or do I belong to? Not have, rather belong to. Do I belong to a scientific worldview? Do I belong to the philosophical worldview or Tawhid worldview? Ask myself that question, understand each of those, because you'll find that within the Muslim community, you have, you know, I would say a majority, and I mentioned earlier, including some speakers or scholars who operate under the scientific worldview. There is a very prominent, and this is very sad to say, and I will not mention names, a very prominent scholar in the Arabic world, speaker, and he is today he proclaimed himself to be a marja. Yet his worldview is pretty much a scientific worldview. His explanation of the world, his explanation of the religion, his explanation of the hadith, his explanations of the schools of thought within Islam, of the even the schools of jurisprudence, you know, the fiqhi schools, is all based on a very rigid scientific worldview, which I'm very glad most of you recognize that. The question that we should perhaps ask ourselves, and I don't want to exclude myself in this statement, is which one do I belong to? You know, that's something that we need to definitely reflect on. This is why scholars and thinkers like Shaykh Mutahhari had word, and if you're familiar with his books, his works, most of it was based on his speeches, his lectures. So they compiled them. He would give a series of lectures, and then they would eventually compile them into these some of his works, and this is one of them, in fact. The reason why he was discussing this is because he realized that the world is so far from, even within the Muslim world, they're so far from a worldview of Tawhid, and they are operating under the worldview of a philosophical, or in fact most commonly under scientific worldview. And today it is even perhaps more than then. So this is why we need to discuss this, study it, understand it, and perhaps make sure that we let me see if I can read the question.
Someone told me as a child that faith and fear of other than God cannot exist in the same heart. But practically, how difficult is this to achieve?
Faith and
And
fear
fear of other than
of
God
other than God cannot exist.
in the
Yeah,
same heart.
yeah. This is based on the levels of Tawhid. Not all of us are gonna be Nabiullah Ibrahim ala nabina wa alayhi salam. Nabiullah Ibrahim, Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him, his level of Tawheed was at such a level that even the angels were asking him if he needed help, and he said, I don't need it from you. To every one of them, he said, I don't need it from you. So he did not, he negated the means because he was focused on the cause of all causes, on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's not expected from everybody. Not everyone can be there. The Quran says, "ما جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه." God has not made two hearts within a person, meaning you cannot love one and love its opposite at the same time. The opposite of. You cannot love God and love the enemy of God, for example, at the same time. In terms of faith, obviously, you cannot. If one is a muwahhid, is a believer, is a monotheist, they cannot believe in God and the oneness of God, and then at the same time believe that other things can control the world. Besides God, min dunillah. Even, one of the issues that perhaps the Wahhabi school of thought misunderstood about the other schools, not just Shia, but other schools who believe in wasila and shafa'a, which is majority of Muslims in theory, or in terms of the schools that they belong to, but practically this is changing. One of their main issues is that they are trying to focus on the Tawheed with neglecting the fact that God is the creator of causes. He's the cause of all causes, but there are other causes, and therefore, if we seek through these means, yet know that it's from Him, there's no issue with it. There's no problem with wasila and shafa'a. But if somebody was to believe that the Prophet or Ahlul Bayt can do something without the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that itself is a shirk. And so, min dunillah is the main issue. Now, we have the levels of Tawheed, and we'll be discussing it, inshallah, as we speak of shirk and the levels of shirk, or the facets, or the different facets of shirk, or the ascribing partners for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when we look at Tawheed, at one level, one believes in that. Another level is when his actions testify to his beliefs, and this is what we call tasdeeq, the concept of sadiqan musaddiqan, truth-telling and testifying with his actions, or what Quran refers to as siddiqeen, the concept of as we read in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those whom you have bestowed your blessings upon amongst the minan nabiyyina was siddiqina was shuhada was salihin. These are the an'amta alayhim. If you want to know who are the an'amta alayhim in Surah Al-Fatiha, it's there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nabiyyin, the prophets, and siddiqeen, and then the martyrs and the righteous ones, salihin. So who are the siddiqeen? Siddiqeen, some suggest it's the successors of the prophets, but Siddiq is not just the successors of the prophet. Those who follow them and their actions testify to their beliefs. Not just it's not just words. You know, I am a monotheist as a as in you know the my belief or the school of thought I belong to, but does my action speak of that faith? Does my action reflect my faith? And am I a musaddiq when it comes to my actions? Do I do tasdeeq of my belief, my monotheism? I hope that that answers that question. And the same thing applies to the fear concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, the messengers will not fear anyone or his awliya. They fear no one but him, except for him. And yes, at some level, one gets to that level, to that point where they fear none or nothing except, and not fear in that sense. I, I I want to share this hadith, and it may confuse you more, but inshallah we'll get somewhere. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, there are 5 things I advise you that you need to do. You need to achieve those 5 things. The first one, he says, none of you should fear nothing except, لا يرجون. The first is hope. He says, none of you should have no hope in anything except from God. لا يرجون أحد منكم إلا ربه, except from the Lord. So don't have hopes in anyone or anything except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a level of Tawhid that the Imam is speaking of. And he says, for this, you need to strive and travel fast and far for. He says, to achieve those 5 things, you need to travel far and fast. He says, لو ضربتم عليها آباط الإبل لكانت لذلك أهلا. If you were to travel far and fast, it is definitely worth it, to achieve those things. What are they? They are very high levels of Tawheed, where he says, one should not have hope in anyone or anything except in their Lord. But then when it comes to fear, he says, وَلَا يَخَافَنَّ أَحَدٌ let none of you fear anything except their own sins. إِلَّا ذَنْبَهُ. So now, should they fear God or not?
You said there were 5 things.
Yeah.
So the first one is not to fear.
Not to have hope in anything except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second one, not to have fear from anything except your sins or one's own sins.
So the question,
yeah. So do we fear God or do we fear the sins?
We fear the consequences of the sins.
Sorry?
We fear the consequences of the sins.
Yes. So God set the consequences. Very good. God set the consequences of the sins in the formative level of the creation. When he created the universe, he set up rules that govern this universe, and there are consequences for one's actions. And so we're meant to fear the consequences of our sins that are set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whenever he says fear God, he's referring to fearing the consequences of your actions, of your sins, God forbid, that are set by God. And that's how he wants it. So consider your actions and the consequences of your actions. I hope that explains it.
Yes. Sheikh, I missed one of the comments. I'll just go through the questions or comments here. One of them said, what if you believe you belong to 2? And this is referring to the worldviews. If they're being honest with themselves, then they would say that their philosophical and religious views merge at this time. So somebody has both at the current moment.
Mm-hmm. It cannot be both, because when we speak of Tawheed, it's one. So either you're Tawheed or you're not Tawheed. If it's not Tawheed only, then it is philosophical. I hope that it's clear what I'm trying to say here.
Right, right.
Yeah, their assumption that they have a Tawhid worldview, it's an assumption, but in a practical sense, the only time we have a Tawhid worldview is when we see God as the only influencer of the universe.
I think what the person might have meant to say is that they're working towards the religious side.
Yes, yes, yeah. No, I mean, of course, we all should be working, and it's important. It's actually very important for us to understand where we are, and therefore, through that, travel to the next level. So, if we do not acknowledge our problems, we will not be able to solve them. We will not be able to treat our ailments if we don't acknowledge that there is an ailment, there is an issue. And so, even in terms of the journey of spirituality or purification, we need to understand where we're at, and through that, try and, or from there, try and improve and constantly then reflect. It's a constant process of reflection, improvement, reflection, improvement.
The other couple of comments that came were, what does travel far and fast mean?
Okay, so
fear his justice for their sins. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, the second part of that person's comment was only fear his justice for their sins.
Okay, so that's more of a comment.
Yeah.
But the first one, in terms of the
what does travel far and fast mean?
Okay, so the Imam used the term, the hadith, he says, أوصيكم بخمس, I advise you of 5 things. لو ضربتم عليها آباط الإبل لكانت لذلك أهلا. If you were to strike the back side of the camel, it is worth it. So it's an expression. What does this expression mean? Camel is used for traveling far, because if you were to travel a short distance, you travel with a horse typically, and when you strike it, you want it to go fast. So the Imam is suggesting that, and again, this is an expression, and through that expression, what we understand is the Imam is saying these things are worthy of traveling far and fast for them. Don't delay it, travel fast and travel far. It could be a physical journey, it could be a virtual journey, a journey to seek those things, to get there. And in the sense, or you could say a spiritual journey. But if one has to go to a certain part of the world, to sit with a certain person, to seek advice and understanding or knowledge through that person. If somebody has to go to ziyarah, for example, and seek shafa'a in the shrines of Ahlul Bayt, salawatullah wa salam alayhim ajma'in, in the shrine of Amirul Mu'mineen, to gain a certain status, to gain a certain level of certainty, to gain, for instance, in this case, to gain this treasure of recognizing God as the only hope, that nothing can help me or do anything for me without the permission and the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, I want that. Why would I go to the resellers when I can go to the source? I just go directly to the source. And so this is perhaps traveling far and fast, could be referring to fast as in don't delay it. It's worthy, you cannot delay this. And far, it could be in terms of a journey of reflection and thinking, or it could be a physical journey that one takes to certain places or certain individuals to seek understanding and knowledge.
The comment was, if we believe in Allah's justice, then our sins would be the reason to fear Him.
if we believe in Allah subhanahu
Allah's
wa ta'ala's
justice,
justice,
then our sins would be the reason to fear Him.
yes, yes. Is this a question or that's a comment?
I think it's a comment.
Yes, yes, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So we know that Allah
Yes.
subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. He has set rules and consequences for actions, and therefore we make sure that we expose ourselves to the good consequences through our good actions, and we fear sins because we know of their you know, bad consequences.
Right. Also on the whole comment of traveling, someone just mentioned we can travel far and fast, meaning that our journey in life is limited, so we do not have to waste, we do not have time to waste.
Yeah, so the expression is used, very good reflection. The expression is used to suggest that it's not worthy. I mean, this is something important that one cannot just sit back and wait. They need to start the journey and start immediately. And even if it's a long journey, even if it's if it's something that they have to travel far for, they have to do it, and sooner than later. That's
Right.
it puts a sorry, just a final. It's to put a sense of urgency to achieve those things.
Right.
Yeah, go.
One question that has come also is, what systems do we have in place to seek counseling for personal crisis of faith? For example, if someone is struggling with a particular aspect of Tawhid, how would they go about seeking help?
If somebody has questions, is that?
If someone is, what is in place, what systems are in place to provide support or some kind of help, counseling, maybe for someone who is going through a personal crisis of faith, for example, how do they go about, seeking help if they're struggling with some aspect of Tawhid?
I'm not sure if they're referring to systems set by our organizations or maraja and scholars, or if it's referring to systems as in what Islamic suggestions we have. But most of the time, whenever there are issues, people go to their scholars, available scholars. And my humble advice is to make sure when you go to somebody and you seek their help, make sure they are what Quran describes in the words of the Habib al-Najjar in Surah Yasin. اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. They make sure they are of a good character. They themselves are following their. For instance, if I want to understand Tawhid, for example, and I go to somebody who is confused in his worldview, for instance, that's a problem, and or practices and so on. So make sure that you go to people who do not. For giving advice, they're not expecting. Now, although it is important for those who seek help and go to these scholars to be generous, to consider helping, but the scholars themselves, they should not be asking. If one needs assistance or help understand things, they should not be asking. That is discouraged by as we read in the Quran, and also they're of good character. Very important. Also what I would add to that is people who don't cast doubts in people's minds. There are one of the biggest issues with this. Earlier I mentioned the specific speaker who is a self-proclaimed marja nowadays, is that all he does is cast doubts in the minds. He does not give answers. He's just basically polluting the minds of the believers with so much doubts. And that's definitely not the way of Ahlul Bayt and prophetic or people who are on the path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And if you have, if we need to continue with the discussion, but there was a couple more comments, I can maybe point those if you want, because I want to make sure you also have the time to finish whatever you had prepared. So let me know.
No, please go ahead with
Yes.
the comments. We pretty much finished the conversation. I just had to cover one more thing, and we pretty much would be finished. But please go ahead with the comments.
Okay. One of them mentioned that how does one move through the spiritual stages if we're trying to travel, to move fast through the spiritual stages? How does even one try to move through those?
Yeah. One of the most important things is acting on what we know. من عمل بما يعلم كفاه الله ما لا يعلم. Whatever we know, we act on it. One of the advisors of some of you may know him, Allam al-Qadi, who was buried in Najaf in Wad al-Salam, and many mu'mineen go and visit his grave. He was asked about this very, it was basically this issue of how do we gain spirituality, what reflection, what action. And he said his simple, humble advice is pray on time. He says, pray on time and God will open the ways for you and the gates of knowledge will come. So act on what we know. Give a priority to connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Prayers, improve prayers. Prayers should not be on autopilot. Unfortunately, many of us, our prayers are autopilot. No, prayers should be a time of communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, inshallah, with those things, we will be able to travel to Him.
Someone also mentioned getting access to Islamic women scholars is another challenge. So I know we're not going to solve that here, but I don't know if you want to shed light on that.
Yeah. One good thing is happening nowadays is anonymous questions. In the old days, women scholars were very important because women would be comfortable asking them questions that they're not comfortable asking the male scholars. But what is available today, I mean, obviously having a female scholar who can answer questions to female they relate to better. Obviously, it would be a great addition to our communities, and it is a lacking at the moment. But until then, my advice is if you want to get access get answers, anonymous questions work very well.
Or I think maybe they've also meant to ask general scholars, but access for women specifically. I think that might be
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe this is one of the platforms and as an opportunity for people to ask, and hopefully every center should or community should have a ability or Q&A session or something like that, so that
of course, and sessions that encourage. In fact, I am very thankful to you and all the participants for such beautiful session of reflections and asking questions, because this is what we need. I can share what I've prepared, but I would rather discuss what you as participants are reflecting on and wanting to understand better and discuss. So obviously we have some material to cover. Nevertheless, this is very valuable, and I do appreciate it.
One more thing. Sorry,
Sure.
I didn't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, something else. Yeah, one other question. I know we're approaching 8, so I want to
Yeah.
a little bit. So the other one was, if you can please assist with the other 3 items of 5.
Okay.
Imam mentioned to travel fast and fast.
Yes. So the other 2 have to do with knowledge, and the last one has to do with sabr. Sabr, I often translate it to persistence, patience, and persistence, not just patience. A lot of people think of sabr as in patience. I think it would be short of the meaning if we just say patience. Patience with persistence is perhaps a better explanation of sabr. So the other, he says, first is only hope in your Lord, only have hope in your Lord, only fear your sins. And then he says, and if you don't know, if any one of you is asked something that they don't know, let them not be ashamed to say, I don't know. Very, very important. Why? Because otherwise they would be spreading misinformation and misguiding people. And unfortunately, many times people are asked questions and they don't. I think I mentioned this maybe here or somewhere else. I cannot remember, but there is a particular city. If you ask them questions, if you ask them for address, you should know that you will not get the right address. It's almost like intentional, and everybody knows about it. I mean, everyone who knows about this particular city, they know about it. And so they avoid it. But if you don't know and you end up asking for directions, they will definitely give you the wrong directions. Why? Because they don't want to struggle and think about it, and they don't want to say I don't know, so they give you the wrong directions. Anyway, if you don't know, say I don't know. This is the 3rd one that the Imam says, and then the 4th one he says, if you let not any of you be ashamed when they don't know things, to seek knowledge, to ask the questions and seek knowledge. And yata'allam. And the last one, he says, you have to be patient and persistent. وَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالصَّبْرِ. He says, because as-sabru min al-iman, patience with regards to faith is like head with regards to the body. There's no good in a body without a head, and no good in faith without patience and persistence, without sabr. I just wanted to basically mention something about the criteria and perhaps conclude, inshallah, unless there are any other questions or comments. Regarding the criteria, we said it has to be encompassing, all areas of life, aspects of human life.
Sorry, I didn't want to distract. Sorry, I had to throw that out there. I have a shirt. I just wanted, I know it's a serious discussion, but I have a shirt that says Baba knows everything. If he doesn't know something, he makes stuff up real fast. Sorry.
That's a very good one. Yeah. So please do not make stuff up. You will lose your children's confidence. Yeah, thank you for that joke. But it's a nice joke.
Maybe for next time, or if we have some time, I wanted to see if you could maybe shed a little bit of light. I know it's part of the book, or maybe it is part of the session, one of the other sessions, but on the first sermon in Nahj al-Balagha, which Imam Ali has on Praise be to God, where he's talking about those, attributes of God. So the perfection of devotion is the rejection of attributes to him. And so I know it's a little bit of a lengthier one, but maybe if not today, someone
it's a good, if you remind me next session, we can actually have a few minutes on that, because it's one of the most beautiful words on Tawhid. And since we are speaking about Tawhid, it would be nice to have that reflection. And although it's not the basic, it's very, very high level, and we'll inshallah reflect on that when we get a chance. But please remind me, and we'll have that discussion inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, so with again regarding the criteria, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because the only worldview that fits the criteria of a comprehensive and complete worldview is the Tawhid worldview. And that's because it has to have the explanation on absolutely everything. And the question that any worldview that is empty of Tawhid that they cannot answer is regarding the origination of the universe. They can never have a complete answer there, and therefore the only proper worldview that can be called a worldview that is comprehensive is the Tawhid worldview. And yeah, with that, and I also wanted to encourage perhaps everyone to do some reflection on where they stand in terms of which worldview they belong to, and perhaps see what they need to do. And let's do this as an activity, inshallah, reflection and activity that we can work on from now until, inshallah, next session. What do I need to do to make sure I have proper vision of the world, and therefore my vision is not blurred, I'm not blind of the reality, and therefore I have a Tawhid worldview. Any other comments or questions? There are none. Inshallah, we'll conclude this session with dua. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
Just a friendly reminder, next week will also be on Zoom, and then I believe the week after, for those who are local, we will try to gather in the Sanford location as well, right, Sheikh?
Inshallah, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, man.